Portugal, The Tale of Two Overthrows, 1926 and 1974. The title is a play on Charles Dickens's novel A Tale of Two Cities. In that novel, the cities of London and Paris are set in stark contrast during the turbulent time of the French Revolution. In 20th century Portugal, two military coups stand dramatically at opposing ends. The 1926 coup was hopelessly tied to a fading past, while the 1974 coup gazed confidently to the future. On the eve of the 52nd anniversary of the Carnation Revolution, it is timely to also reflect on the profound contrast between the two military coups. In juxtaposing them, we can best appreciate the dramatic differences. There may be nothing more prescient than recognizing the polar opposite aims of the two military overthrows that define Portugal's modern history. The military coups of 1926 and 1974, and the political outcomes they spawned, exemplify the dueling visions of a nation struggling at the crossroads of a fading yet gripping past and an uncertain future. Although Portugal was fortunately spared a violent rupture during the 1974 military coup, the possibility of civil war, as in Spain in the 1930s, was always a looming fear. Yet that possibility was highly unlikely, since Portugal by the 1970s was well entrenched in a stable Atlanticist order. Despite all the rhetoric and fears of communist takeovers and Soviet influence, it was doubtful that Portugal, under the mantra of Western Europe's Cold War establishment, would end up in an alliance with the East. However, in the colonies, having suffered violent repression for 13 years at the hands of the Estado Novo, their vulnerability after independence became the battleground for a geopolitical rivalry. The former Portuguese colonies endured decades-long conflicts, descended into civil wars, and saw proxy armies clash violently in the twilight of the Cold War. As we honor the arrival of one of the participants in the 1974 military coup that launched a revolution, we are faced with opposing spirits inherent in the two coups. Our visiting April's captain, a popular term of respect, is Colonel José Santos Coelho. He was part of a clandestine group of rebellious junior officers whose plan was to occupy a radio station. Their mission was to signal the start of the military coup by broadcasting two songs, Goodbye and Grandola Vila Morena. The songs served as the cue to launch the campaign to topple the Estado Novo regime. The regime had roots in the 1926 military dictatorship, known as the National Dictatorship, Ditadura Nacional. The May 28, 1926, military coup was a counter-revolutionary uprising against the First Republic, 1910 to 1926. Ironically, the April 25, 1974, military coup was a rejection of the ethos of the earlier military overthrow of the First Republic. Yet they both emerged from the military ranks, but each with very different agendas and ideals. The end of Portugal's First Republic by a military junta was justified as a means of restoring order and fiscal prudence. However, these rhetorical claims were a subterfuge. The military cadre and the privileged, wealthy elites they protected were highly reactionary. They were particularly threatened by the rising influence of the left-wing anarcho-syndicalists within the First Republic. By 1933, another shakeup had taken place, consolidating the regime's corporatist and ultranationalist rule. It was rooted in European fascism, sharing themes of palingenesis, yet it diverged significantly from other fascist movements. The Estado Novo, under Antonio Salazar, was to a degree more pragmatic and less populist, less ideological, less fixated on chauvinist and jingoistic aims. It was more preoccupied with preserving traditional customs within ultramontanist ideals and with retaining control over Portugal's colonial holdings, fashioned under pluricontinentalism. With a nostalgia for a long-expired, far-flung empire, Portugal's dictatorship was a latter-day socio-political order dressed up with vestiges and homages to a bygone era. Unlike Italy and Germany, the two most expansionist and belligerent fascist powers, Portugal had already established a vast overseas empire. Unlike the newly consolidated nations of Italy and Germany, 1870, Portugal's national territory had long been settled. Rather than expansionist fever, Portugal was in a state of retrenchment, preservation, and isolation. Portugal looked inward rather than outward to create a cultural and ideological palisade against morally corrupt foreign influences, particularly communism. With the ascension and devotion to the visions and prophecies at Fatima, in 1917, the Estado Novo authorities cloaked their repressive control under the guise of fidelity to the popular pious religious movement. Portugal mirrored the Catholic Church's own notions of weathering the storm of modernism, exemplified by Popes Pius IX and Pius X, who sought to fortify the Catholic world against the modernist liberal scourge. The regime encouraged an adulation for agrarian life, a mystical idolizing of pastoral existence, and the noble peasant, reminiscent of the fascist romanticism behind the slogan "Blood and Soil." Ultimately, the regime was a relic, frozen in time, an attempt to revive an idolized past that never was. Yet, by and large, it was a modern corporate edifice controlled by 40 families. It epitomized Voltaire's satirical mockery of the idea in his novella Candide, 1759, that we live in optimal conditions. In the novella, despite witnessing the horrific atrocities of the Lisbon earthquake of 1755, Dr. Pangloss continued to believe that it was all for the greater good, since it was the best of all possible worlds. Likewise, under the dictatorship in Portugal, there were no alternatives. It was the natural order of things. Meddling with it would only bring further misery. Like Pangloss and his fatalistic judgment of the Lisbon earthquake as merely part of God's design, we were led to believe that the Salazar regime was part of divine providence. Thus, metaphorically, the drawbridge was raised, and behind the walled fortress, Portugal had a lagging population that had remained undeveloped for 50 years. The Estado Novo was a tragic period in history. It evoked an apatheicized past, yet it attempted to navigate a rapidly changing world in a leaky raft. Thankfully, the Carnation Revolution of April 25, 1974, ended this in one wondrous historical moment, washing away all the preposterous and pretentious notions of the decrepit regime. The Carnation Revolution embodied the best of Western Enlightenment tradition: peace, liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy, and the rule of law. Although these broad ideals and values have only come to fruition in fits and starts, we continue to pursue them as our goals. This is why we enthusiastically celebrate the Carnation Revolution. April always.